It's Off Exit 10, presented by Capital District Sport and Fitness.
One can take you several hours.
Right.
So like it's all about getting it right on that first go around.
Yeah, it's good. But I appreciate you doing this. We were just talking, but we met years ago, probably 5 years ago, briefly before we opened the gym. I had moved back from Boston and was just trying to make connections and find people that I thought were doing great stuff in this area, and ended up through my uncle making my way over to one of your seminars in in Saratoga.
Yeah. And that seemed like ages ago, but I mean, even back then, when your uncle, approached me about, that his nephew was coming to the area, it was already intriguing. Because I mean, your history and background has got some depth, right? I mean, you were doing some pretty great things in Boston.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm from this area, and I made my way out to Boston. I followed my wife, who was in grad school at the time, out there to live in a little one-bedroom apartment with three of us, and took out an internship, at Cressy Sports Performance, then went to massage therapy school, and just spent a lot of time working out there.
Sure.
But we always knew we wanted to come back to this area to start a family and open a business. But all of my contacts were in Boston. All of my clients, all of my professional network, doctors and PTs and chiros. So I came back here like, geez, the best way to do this is to build these new networks of awesome people. So before we really get into it, we have Dr. Richard Kim on tonight. He's the owner of Richard Kim Medicine. He has offices located all throughout New York State, and the closest to us in Saratoga. And he practices non-surgical orthopedic regenerative medicine. So using stem cells is one of your primary therapies?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and just helping people heal their own bodies. I mean, the medical world is a crazy one, as is anything else, and there's a lot of different things out there and ways things are done. And the regenerative medicine just really intrigues me, and I think it is going to be a big thing going into the future, and already is. So how did you first get into regenerative medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I think to talk about it a little bit, just understanding what medical training is like, right? So you go to undergrad, you go to medical school, you do your internship and residency, and for me, that was a combined internal medicine and pediatric residency. Came out, decided to do sports medicine. I wanted to be able to treat kids. I wanted to treat adults, and all aspects of sports medicine. But pretty quickly, I think once you come out of that, you realize the gap. And you've been around, you guys have been around high-level athletes for a long time, so you guys understand this. Once you get to steroids or cortisone, and then there isn't a whole lot, and then it's like pretty quickly that the conversation to surgery plays into the mix. And then somewhere around maybe 2017 or so, I went to a conference and I saw this guy give a talk about regenerative medicine and stem cell and down in Cornell. And the results with it were just outstanding. I mean, he was just showing on functional MRIs that you can grow cartilage in a knee. And I thought, okay, either this guy is just blowing smoke or this is going to be, absolutely groundbreaking. Looked around the room thinking that everybody, felt as excited as I was about it, but it didn't seem to have that same hit that same chord with people. So immediately after that, I just got pretty intense in terms of, learning about it, and traveled and did all the things to make sure that I was proficient and then hopefully one day be expert at it. But I think the thing about it that really sort of leapt out to me was the fact that between that steroid and that surgical conversation, this really filled a huge gap. It wasn't going to fill the entire gap, right? But it was going to fill a big part of that gap.
Yeah, and in here, right, Paul, somebody comes in with an injury, let's just say it's a muscle strain or a tendon injury. It's like the name of the game is tissue healing, and then, regaining function with that new tissue. So on just the biological sense, it makes sense. Why not try to use what your body has to heal itself, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes sense to me because why not be able to, like you said, fill in those gaps and avoid the surgery if you can, and avoid getting to that last point.
Yeah.
If there's a way to be able to do it, and your body can recreate what was once there.
Yeah.
You know, it can definitely help athletes, you know, either prolong their career or whatever it could do for them. Help with their performance, help them not feel in pain, all those things.
Yeah. And definitely, like, you know, even I would say 5-10 years ago, we all know that Kobe went to Germany, and then, you know, Clay Buchholz used it for his shoulder or his elbow.
Yeah, you heard of A-Rod, I think, went somewhere.
Right. And everybody's going to all these, you know, foreign distant places. But, you know, the fact that it was becoming more prevalent at home here in the States, you know, is definitely the thing that helped push its popularity.
How much was it talked about in medical school or in residency or in your training? Yeah,
not at all, quite honestly. You know, I think what they teach is still the old didactics, right? Things break down mechanically, and therefore you got to fix them mechanically. You know, the biochemistry of things like tissue breakdown, right? Are never talked about. I mean, I can say the word tendonitis, and then the difference between that and tendinopathy to you guys, and you guys will be like, "Yep, we're all over it," right? Not even a concept, and not even 5 minutes of lecturing in medical school. And then, and truth be told, even in residency, you know, that's when the concepts were first introduced, and then you've got to really sort of learn how to go about it after that.
Because, okay, so you go to this seminar in 2017 and a light bulb goes off. Then what are your next steps to say, okay, this is how I want to start to treat people?
Yeah, the search is pretty quick, right? I mean, you go onto Google and you say regenerative medicine, you know, courses, and it's a pretty short list. The biggest one was one out in Vegas that I had to go to for several days. And then I took one down in Florida pretty soon after. And then after that, you know, I just sort of spent time with other people who are doing it as well. And then, you know, you sort of learn, you know, I'm sure just like all of our, you know, sort of service industry fields, you sort of learn the basics, and then you expand on your experience. And then, you know, we just got it more refined, you know, year after year, time after time. So yeah, some courses, and then a lot of personal experience.
Is what makes it, or one of the things that makes it not prevalent in our country, at least right now, due to insurance and insurance restrictions and lack of coverage on certain things?
Yeah, you know, this is a question that I probably answer in my office to patients.
Because you're cash pay, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So it's the office is actually, you know, today was actually the last day of any sort of insurance coverage. As of Monday, we go completely what we call direct pay. And this is something we talk about, especially in the world of stem cells and regenerative medicine, to our office, to our patients in our office on the daily. And I say, and I always lead the conversation with this, you know, that U.S. healthcare is not geared towards the patient. And I think, you know, we can all sort of understand that. We can all, you know, empathize with that.
Yeah, we've all been in it personally before, and we've all seen people.
Sure. I was just driving up here, and my friend came to see me for back pain this morning, and he can't navigate his own insurance to try to get an MRI for him, right? And they make it cumbersome, and they make it cumbersome on purpose. So for our office, and regenerative medicine across the country has never been covered. So, you know, it's just part of you know, the way we have to deliver our care.
Right, but it allows you to do a lot more in practice with a patient when you're cash pay.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us way more flexibility. I don't have to beg companies for you know, permission to treat their patients. Once somebody decides, yeah, this is what's good for me and my body, then we can proceed. We don't have to hurdle jump like customary.
What makes insurance deny coverage versus take it? How much money they can get off of something?
Yeah. So a lot of this goes back to how government bodies, things like Medicare, Medicaid, decide things, and then a lot of private payers, the big companies, then decide what they're going to cover based on what those government bodies cover. So if the government body says no, then everybody behind them have the ammunition to say, look, it's just not a covered service at this point. But, I tell people all the time, everything started out in some sort of investigational or experimental or studied. That's medicine, that's science, right? So I think at some point I'd like to see it covered. I think it's probably going to happen. When and the timeline, I think that part's the harder piece to predict.
Right. One of the nice parts, though, Paul, imagine, because this is your traditional medicine, the doctor is seeing in a traditional model how many people a day, and you're just another number in a quick, no more than probably 10, 15-minute window, see this person go out, see the next person go out. How can you make a decent diagnosis in that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, so let's sort of talk about it in like a broader scope. When you guys see, athletes come through the door, or even, just people who are active and they're looking to develop a program, you guys have an assessment, right? I mean, for you, how long is that assessment typically?
An hour.
Mm-hmm. A solid hour.
A solid hour.
Right.
And that makes up, we want to have a conversation, get to know you, where are you
Sometimes
coming
longer.
from? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's part relationship, it's part analysis, and all of that. With the way the insurance works, and this, especially what we call CMS, they decide basically how much you're going to be reimbursed for the exact same service year after year. I think for the pain management world, which I guess technically I'm part of now, the cutback was somewhere between 4 to 8% depending on the service. So imagine, you want to do hour-long assessments, but somebody out there says, look, you're going to get paid 8% less, and then maybe 5% less the next year or in 2 years. It just amps the pressure on trying to do things just so that you're not sinking. Never mind, exceeding, but just trying not to sink.
Right.
And you want to be accurate, right? You want to give a good product. You want to do right by your patient or by your client, or however you want to describe that.
Yeah, because the initial diagnosis and getting that as correct as possible is huge, because now you can prevent somebody from getting into this chase your tail, going in a circle, stuck in our medical system. Talk about that, just like when somebody comes into you, what are you doing to be like, okay, let me make sure our initial diagnosis, is on the right track and going to get you towards where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think as any assessment goes, you want to hear it straight from the person, what they're feeling and what they're experiencing, and that obviously for us formulates how we go about making our diagnosis. We use a lot of tools immediately when the patient's in front of us, physical exam, and just being able to manipulate their back or their hip or their knee or their wrist or whatever, and then moving on to things like X-rays and MRIs. Is part of the assessment. But it's that sort of continued conversation, right? So being able to explain to somebody, well, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, and here's what we anticipate, and here's what we're, in what we find, where we can then take that information. And for what I do specifically, stem cells is part of what we do, right? And it's a big portion of what we do, but in some places and sometimes it's not even appropriate. So that's why the whole diagnosis piece is critical. If you're not getting that part right, then you're going to be offering the wrong therapy.
Yeah, I love to hear that, because you want to also have other tools in your tool belt to treat appropriately. That's where some other people may go wrong, because if you just do this one type of surgery and someone comes to you, well, that's your tool and that's your moneymaker. So what do you think you're going to probably push?
That's right. That's
exactly.
right. And and that's in. I don't want to say that surgery is always bad. Right?
It's needed sometimes, right?
There's a role for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Paul, for example.
Yeah, tore my Achilles. I kind of need the surgery for that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you knew that was expected, right?
I didn't even know that it was possible not to have surgery on it, because he said, he's like, well, you could not, but then X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was an option. I want to be able to use my foot and like do things like kind of need to. But yeah, like if you don't need to get to that point, why go all the way to the surgery? Or if we need to, like the diagnosis needs to be correct so we know where we need to go or where the starting point needs to be.
Sure.
And it's the same thing we do in here. It's like if we don't do our assessment properly, throw somebody underneath a barbell for squats or the trap bar, and all of a sudden now they hurt their back. And it's like there was something we did in the assessment or didn't do to find that problem that probably would have come up if we had just done a full thorough thing there, which luckily we have that hour and 15, depending on the person, sometimes a little longer than that. We have that time to be able to spend with them. And it sounds like you have that time with your practice, whereas like we talked about in some of the other, insurance-based models, you don't have that as much time to be able to get that full, diagnosis that you would like, or take that time on it. And, that's where, again, sometimes surgery is needed. An Achilles injury, but sometimes it's not.
And I not to try to fault anybody who's used to see 20 and now they're seeing 60 a day, but I think the pressure from having to alter your the mechanics of how your day runs based on what the payer is going to pay. This is, I think, something that we're all sort of forced into, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately. And it's all people know, and that's why I'm happy you're here, so we can educate people that sometimes that model is not the best for you, for your care and for your health, and for where you want to be in life. I want to talk a little bit now just about stem cells and the biology and what they are and where they are in our body. And so if you don't mind, just
I'm a blank slate, by the way.
Blank slate. Perfect.
Yeah, educate us, educate the people, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to describe it for the blank slates out there, right, is that just imagining taking an area that has damage, right, and as we injure or as we age, even the ability to repair some of those areas, it's diminished over time. We lose that capacity, right, or else we would all just be living like Wolverine and forever, right?
That'd be awesome.
Which would be great. That's next on my project. But so the blank slate version of it is basically transplanting those restorative cells from one part of the body and placing them where they can be functional again. The deeper conversation to that is that there is a lot of both information within those cells that get released, that get consumed. They eat up bad inflammatory cells. And sometimes when pain and inflammation happen, they happen in cycles. We were talking about something in cycles before, but that's a lot of life, right? And that's a lot of injury. So to be able to get somebody broken out of that cycle is a big piece. And I really look at what I do as sort of like, I just sort of like crack the seal, right? I try to get him out of that habit of inflammation and pain. And then, I think there's some really critical roles in getting somebody from injury through stem cells and then functional again. And I know you guys have had physical therapists on before and having that conversation, which is a big portion of this. And then, of course, ultimately getting people to come see people like you. So if we can somehow keep them in the quote unquote good cycle, right? And maybe using stem cells to initially crack the seal and then put them in that pipeline. I mean, I think that's the overarching conversation. So if you can think about stem cells in that sense, in that very early elemental, cellular, molecular, protein specific, unraveling, recreating tissue in certain areas. Well, people, get like to ask the question, well, is my knee going to look like I'm 15 again? No, that's not going to happen. I think a lot of people hear stem cells and think that, well, I'm just going to Benjamin Button this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going backwards, right? But in actuality, it's that sort of specific change, but enough of a change so that people can head down a better path.
Right. Well, cells in our body, they have specific functions. And now the nice part with stem cells is what? They're more of a blank slate?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of blank slates, right? These so it's what we call potency, right? So potency really is strength. So if you let's talk about embryonic stem cells, which of course I don't do, nobody in the States should be doing because nobody's allowed. We call that an omnipotent cell. Basically, it can do anything, right? It can go on and make Dolly the sheep. It can make you a new liver or whatever with the right programming. So the stem cells that we're working with is what we call pluripotent. So it has strength, but it has some strength, not all strength, right? As you can imagine, from the omnipotent cell to the pluripotent cell, there's several different, what we would call differentiations that would have to happen in order to get to there. And then, you take those pluripotent cells, and if they live in the liver, they create new liver, as you get damaged, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if it didn't, we would never survive our 20s, right?
Right. True.
But that's the idea. So you can't go around harvesting liver on people. So what we do specifically in our office is we use bone marrow, which is a great renewable source of stem cells or pluripotent stem cells. And then the second is we also use fat, so adipose. So we'll use those stem cells. And we call them mesenchymal stem cells. And so it's not the same thing as obviously then saying embryonic stem cells. Mm-hmm. There's that clear difference. Mm-hmm. But that's the gist of it.
So you have a patient that's getting stem cell therapy. You're going to extract from their own bone marrow and adipose tissue.
Yep.
And then what happens after you extract?
Yeah. So there's some clear guidelines on what you're allowed to do. So you can take those cells out, and if you were in the Cayman Islands or if you were in Mexico, you could expand them in a dish. 4 days later, come back and inject them, possible, right? Here in the States, however, we have pretty clear guidelines. And so you're only allowed to what we call minimally manipulate them. And so for us, it's just a centrifuge. It's a separation process. I like to describe it as oil and vinegar, right? If you mixed oil and vinegar together, it looks one color, but you let it sit, or if you spun it through a centrifuge, you get those layers to separate out. And so if you can isolate those layers and utilize those cells, given the density of the cell, that's how we're using it. So they're really unchanged. They're just isolated.
Right. And then that's getting injected to an area where there's tissue damage, where somebody's struggling to heal.
That's right. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting the right diagnosis, processing those cells correctly, and then being able to put them back in the correct spot, right? Because you can imagine if one of those steps goes wrong, then the whole thing's off,
mm-hmm.
right? Your diagnosis is wrong. Your extraction and processing process is no good. Your put back, right, is not good. Then the whole thing fails. So for us, everything is guided. We always use ultrasound guidance, or what we call fluoroscopy, which is live guided X-ray. So we'll take an X-ray, look at a picture, move the X-ray, take a picture. So we use these methods to guide our injection process.
So if you're a sniper, you know exactly what 100%. Tissue it's going into.
Yep. That's actually probably the best example I've heard in a while. Just to be that exact. To me, it feels like a video game, but like talking about snipers makes it, makes it that much more real.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of baseball players,
yep.
and we see a lot of post Tommy Johns, and
yes.
we work a lot with a doctor in New York City, and we created a relationship with him. He does Tommy Johns. So we had a kid go to a doctor here and said he needed PRPs, and he was going to do a non-ultrasound guided PRP. It's just like, how do you know where that's going?
Yeah, I mean, um, people have been doing it for a long time, and they are, certain of their accuracy.
Right.
There's, I forget now the exact study, but they looked at injecting inside the shoulder joint, taking medical students versus trained surgeons. I think the trained surgeons were in the joint something like 60% of the time. And then the medical student could get in using an ultrasound machine like 95% of the time. Those may not be the exact numbers. Somebody's probably going to write to me and say, well, they were actually
But
this and
the
that.
difference is that
But
substantial.
it's that clear. Yeah. And so if you didn't have that technology, that's one thing, but it exists. So why sacrifice the accuracy?
Right.
I mean, that's like anything. If you have the technology to be more accurate or be better at something.
Yeah, I mean, for you guys too, assessing your athletes, you guys have used video, you guys have used, I mean,
we'll
all
use
the different technologies.
Yeah, we'll use video. I mean, we try to keep things simple in here. There's crazy tech out. Like I know places that will put little things on your arm and on the bar and measure bar speed, like which is cool. But with like a novice to training, like somebody who's new to strength training, it's like let's just make sure we're moving better, assessing your range of motion, make sure that's improving subjectively. You're feeling better.
Sure.
And we'll do like power markers, a vertical jump and broad jump and things like that.
But when you want to look at something like, I guess, take it more to a professional level, you look at all the professional athletes and all the technology and everything they use to
that pours into them. Sure.
Oh, think about using the people with the Whoop bands now, and HRV and all of that, tracking your sleep, your respiratory rate.
Sure.
Like if you can be more accurate, why not?
But there's tech, and we're talking, I think, a lot about tech in assessment, but there's tech in the delivery of, how you guys, either teach or train your people. So, for you guys, your quote unquote therapy involves tech too. So yes, there's plenty, I think, to be had in the simplicity of things sometimes, but sometimes tech helps.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And especially if it's an accuracy thing. Yeah. I'd rather be closer to 100 than not.
Tremendously. This episode of Off Exit 10 is brought to you by Drink Alchemy. Fatigue and brain fog affect us all, destroying everything we pursue. Whether as an athlete, artist, creator, or entrepreneur, our mind holds the key to performing optimally. By combining the most potent organic nootropics found in nature, Drink Alchemy delivers sustainable boost to creativity, memory, energy, and focus in one epic beverage. Stop pumping your body full of excessive amounts of caffeine and unknown proprietary blends from other energy drinks, and get clean energy from Drink Alchemy's natural nootropics like lion's mane, L-theanine, and caffeine from green tea. Used by Olympians, D1 athletes, MMA fighters, and entrepreneurs, Drink Alchemy has become a huge part of my daily routine, making sure I'm functioning optimally during long days of coaching athletes, running CDSF, and getting in quality workouts myself. So do yourself a favor and ditch the energy drinks loaded with caffeine, other stimulants, and who knows what else, and head over to drinkalchemy.com today. Live with your mind unbound and save 10% off your order by using code CDSF at checkout. That's drinkalchemy.com, promo code CDSF for 10% off your order today. So guys who leave the country for different therapies, you brought it up. Are they going because there's less restriction? Because you can take these cells and then multiply them. What's that doing?
Yeah. When you're multiplying a cell, there is, I think, a question mark as to is the potency, we talked about potency before, is the potency of a cell that's been replicated 10 times or 50 times the same as the original cell? I think that's the part about the literature that we've got now, the research studies that we have now, that is weak. I think that's something that's definitely got to be explored. And I think people are saying, yes, we'll take the numbers over sometimes the strength sometimes.
Right. So you're playing what? A quantity game? If I inject more in, I have a better shot at something happening.
That's right. But here's a little geek out for you. So when a cell replicates, the ends of the DNA have to shorten because you cannot replicate to its full extent. You lose a certain amount of DNA at each replication, right? Not making this up, well studied, right? It's easily identifiable. But now you're doing it in a dish, unregulated, unchecked.
Right.
You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're cutting off, how much you're cutting off. Is the potency of that cell at the end after 50 replications, the same as the first. I don't know that I know the answer to that. I just know that it changes, but to what extent?
Right, we don't know. And it's just going to take more people doing it and research. And,
That's right.
Yeah, to get there. Okay, so what are your thoughts on other types of injections? I know we talked about corticosteroids and NSAIDs and PRPs. Do you utilize those as well at certain times or no?
Yeah, steroids definitely have a role. It is a relatively inexpensive therapy, very generic. Some downsides, not a ton. I would say the biggest problem with it is that it doesn't last very long. I tell my patients, the first one lasts 3 months, the second one 3 weeks, and the third one 3 days. And some people are, defy those odds. Some people get a year. I've had some people even get 2 years out of it, which is amazing and awesome, but not typical. How I use steroids in my office is primarily diagnostic. So before I go and I say, listen, I think this is your problem, right? The X-ray, the MRI, my analysis has drawn me to this conclusion. But before we try that costly PRP or the stem cell, and before we decide to start injecting things, let's make sure. And so a single steroid injection can help me confirm my hypothesis, my suspicion. And if we do, that gives us much more confidence to doing the PRP and the stem cells. I would probably say that maybe, 1 out of 5, people who come into our office, will say, I've got this pain, but I don't know what it is. For the most part, when people read about stem cells and read about regenerative medicine, they know. They're coming in, they're like, look, I got this diagnosis, I had surgery for this, and I still have a problem with this. And then there'll be the occasional, I don't know what the issue is yet. Yeah.
Is there a downside to having too many steroid shots in the same tissue?
Yeah, fantastic question.
We get it a lot in here. People will ask, and I don't know the. You read online anything, I don't know the answer.
So it's on the internet, it's true, right?
Obviously. That's where I got. No, I shouldn't say it. The steroids have been shown in injection in knees to actually degenerate the cartilage somewhat faster. So the answer would be yeah, right? I have some questions around that. Is it because you feel better and then you're doing way more and then
right?
You're
There's so many variables.
Right.
Yeah,
we're dealing with human beings, man.
Right. And the same goes for tendons. I think for a lot of tendon-based issues, cortisone and steroids are used very, very inappropriately. Mm-hmm. So there is a downside, I think, to steroids and repetitive exposures. I think the incidental, the one for diagnostics, occasional use here and there is fine. But I think for the majority of the case, we are probably slinging too much of it on our patients.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it causes problems with elevated blood glucose, your blood pressure goes up, you can develop all of these other side problems with it that probably aren't great either.
Right. Do stem cells perform better when injected in certain tissues or no?
No, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that one.
Yeah, or is it just they're doing their job? They're a blank slate, put me into tendon tissue, ligament tissue, cartilage, and it's going to do its job.
I used to think that, it was the equivalent all the way around, ankle, knees, hip, shoulder, whatever. I think this is where some of the mechanics and some of the inherent biology of the target area matters, right? Mm-hmm. And I will tell you just point blank that stem cells in shoulders, hard, really difficult. Results are tough.
Why is that?
I think it's the way that the joint interacts. So instead of being, this is just my theory on it, is that, hip, ball and socket, but it's still one on top of another. Knee, it's two bones opposing one another, but very much in that vertical plane. Shoulder is side to side, right? And so I think between what happens in the ligaments and the tendons, it's not just clear joint. that's the issue.
Yeah, my old boss, Eric Cressy, who I work for in Boston, would say, it's a very simple analogy, but your shoulder's like a golf ball sitting on a golf tee. It's like that shallow, and it has that much movement and play. And
Well, it makes sense that because if you think of other shoulder surgeries, like they tend to be the ones that I feel like are more
Or like a little more fragile, right?
more fragile,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
hit and miss, more whether are you going to get the results you really
Yeah,
want
good point, Paul.
out of it, and that I think that makes a lot of sense when you talk about how the joint is actually structured and one on top of the other as opposed to the golf ball on a tee thing that we talked about, which I use that analogy in here for certain exercises.
So here's a great question for you guys. When you guys are training shoulders, then is your approach different than what you want out of a hip or a knee?
yeah, it's different because everybody's so different. We could have a 17-year-old girl who has multi-directional instability and is hypermobile, and the exercise selection in how you even coach them is completely different than, a 6-year-old male who works at a desk all day who's kyphotic and really tight. It's like you have to approach those shoulder joints completely differently.
Yeah. But are there some similar principles just because it's a shoulder
Yeah, I
versus, those two people in the knee,
Yeah, because it's a shoulder versus a knee, you're saying? Yeah, it's a more complex joint in my head because it has way more available range of motion, way more play, that's the right word, than just a hinge joint.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not replicated anywhere else in the body just quite like that, right? I mean, there might be some similarities in that it's rounded or what have you, but yeah, nothing quite like
And then we see so many overhead athletes and throwers and volleyball players. It's like, well, as humans, I don't think we were designed to do that movement that quickly that many times.
Right,
So,
and that hard with that much force.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
and now you have guys throwing, mid-90s, low 100s. Like, it's
Ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, it is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah, it's crazy. So how much can how we just treat our bodies impact our own stem cell function? Because we all have stem cells in us right now that are working to help us heal and regenerate tissue.
Yeah.
And can poor lifestyle and stress impact their ability to help us heal and help us recover?
Yeah. I don't know of a great study that's going to point out, look, eat blueberries and you can preserve your neck forever, right? I don't know of a direct correlation like that, but there's something there to it, right? I mean, we can talk about inflammatory diets and we could talk about the effects of alcohol. I think we can all pretty much agree that maybe smoking and its direct effects on virtually everything, right? But everything else I think is a little bit harder to say with that much conviction. But I think and I'm going to just take my own experience. When I go to draw stem cells, right? And whether it's fat or whether it's bone marrow, just my experience, right? I can tell a difference the moment I pull that first 10 milliliters of bone marrow out. A clear difference in that quality. Now, I probably have to look back and say, well, did the patient necessarily do better because of that? But at least from the standpoint of the amount of stem cells that we're getting and what my projected potency of those stem cells are, I think is different. And the question I always like to ask my patient is, what's your diet? What do you eat? How do you live your life, right? One of the more stark examples was I had this male carrier, and I'm going to forget the reference, but he does the morning ice baths. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like nearly 0 degrees and just sits there for I don't know how many minutes and does it every day religiously, right? And I've covered rugby. I've seen plenty of guys get in ice baths, and it looks terrible.
It's not fun. It's not fun.
Right?
It's not
right?
fun.
I would never, but he's subjecting himself to this. I got to tell you, the quality of his fat when he came out, when it came out of him, I was like, there has to be something to this, right? And so in some people, I'll see the quality of their fat, and I'm like, maybe a little bit less optimistic.
Right.
But I think the one thing that I have correlated the most to was nutrition, right? People who are pretty fastidious about their diet, minimization on processed foods, the whole organic piece, we can talk about, but people who are a little bit more stringent about the quality of their foods. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is why partly nutrition's a whole nother crazy realm, a crazy field, like anything else.
Yeah.
Sam's producing again today. Shout out to Sam, but she's a dietitian. And it's a crazy field to be in. I couldn't imagine it because everybody has these preconceived notions. And what drives me crazy is people that just live by strict, and obviously calories matter, but just strict like macro tracking and caloric deficit or surplus, because at some point, well, the quality just matters. The quality of what you're putting in matters just as much.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not a agricultural expert by any means, but I think the quality of foods have changed over time. I think what we put in our bodies has changed over time.
And our biology is still our biology, like we were
it's
when
not
we were back in the
change.
day.
Like that didn't change.
Like I think we were still meant to like chase down antelope and eat raw meat to some extent, right?
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that a weird thing? We're living in this world that's just like forced around us, but our
instinct Yes.
is not to sit in the car, drive to work every day, get stressed by a million different things throughout
sit
6
for 8 hours.
Yeah, be putting down processed sugars and bad fats, and it's not our instinct. It's not what we need to feel good. And
I think biologically the hormonal variation that you are supposed to go through in a day, like you're supposed to have some flight or fight, right? You're supposed to have some sedentary downtime. Like it's all supposed to be part of it, but I think it's pretty even now.
But is it the constant micro stressors and that constant cortisol production that's terrible?
Yeah.
I mean, probably not being done in the way that it was intended, right? The importance of rest, the importance of sleep for your athletes, right? And the importance for rest and sleep for my patients. Like we've screwed up that system to some extent here.
A lot. Definitely have screwed that system up, but
I think nutrition and sleep are both two huge components.
Well, and we talk about it in here all the time.
I mean, yeah, you could, let's say you had an injury, you could get your stem cell therapy, help yourself heal, do PT, get in here, but then you're eating terribly, a lot of processed foods, you're not sleeping, enough hours at night.
Yeah.
It's like you're still going to put yourself in a tough situation to fully heal, to live pain-free, to perform the way that you want to.
Well, and you can't out-train a bad diet, like as much as people say, oh, I work out so I can eat what I want, you still can't out-train a bad diet. Eventually things catch up to you, whether you end up having to go get stem cells done or
But that's what's
else.
so interesting. But then even if you end up there, but all of the years of poor diet, maybe your quality of stem cell is your ability to heal isn't as good.
And then that, I think that makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
You kind of are what you eat, ultimately.
Now, do you think those stem cells, let's say somebody...
Is there research on this or no?
Or no? As far as like how the
I don't know
goes.
of a direct study.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, the number of studies that are surrounding stem cells now is unlike anything. It's just ballooned.
In how many recent years have you seen? Spike.
Last 10 years, it probably picked up. In the last 5 years, it's like in that exponential log.
But that's a good thing, right?
Oh, it's a fantastic thing. I think there's so much that needs to be answered.
Because who regulates things in this country? Is it FDA? Who's making regulations?
Yeah, in terms of how stem cell injections are defined, is by the FDA. They'll tell you whether it's a drug or not a drug. Mm-hmm. So they're pretty firm on what you're allowed to do with it. But it's kind of like anything else in medicine. It's like an appendectomy. It's a procedure, and so therefore it doesn't carry that same sort of nobody regulates an appendectomy. There's nobody that says you can or can't do it. Now, certainly you can go overboard with some of this, and the FDA has been pretty clear about tracking these people down. But overall, not that kind of not that kind of strict control.
Right. And then in this country, though, you can't use, how did you describe it? Because you have the embryonic and then you have the, what were the words that you used for those two?
So the embryonic would then, be what we call allograft, and that means that you're taking it from somebody else.
And it's coming where? Is this like placenta, umbilical
So
tissue?
a lot of it is birth product tissue. So birth product tissue is, placental, Wharton's, umbilical cord, and at this point in this country, there is no commercially available viable product. But that's where it would come from. But when you are doing that, you are taking it from another individual into yourself, right? So that carries some inherent risk.
Yeah, because you have to look at what? Blood type has to match and something like that?
Tissue type has to match.
Right.
Just like any other transplant.
Yeah. And a lot of those products are sometimes even grown, right? So it carries an infection risk, and right. So I think there is an important regulatory component to all of this, right? Because I think anytime anything new comes out, people are pretty quick to jump on and offer it as panacea. You know, there's been some really terrible injuries from people saying, we've got stem cells and caused some real injury to people. So these sorts of things are important.
Yeah. Yeah, another avenue we work together, which I love, is through, a physical therapist is almost like this middleman. Like you're running on the spectrum. Like I think you mentioned before, help the tissue heal, give it biologically what it needs, but then you have to give it inputs to then function how it should be functioning and gaining strength. How do you view all that? Like, are you seeing this whole spectrum when you're treating somebody? It's like, hey, I'm gonna, help you on the healing front, but you're going to have to put in some work post.
Oh, totally. I really frame it to them that this is the beginning of the rest of your life, kind of, right? We're going to do some things and we're going to change some things, but the maintenance of it, the growth of it, the progression of it, that's really on you. And physical therapy is that great sort of like single step upwards. But then, you guys have trained plenty of athletes before, and you train the person for the activity that they're looking to do, right? You want to play a 60-minute basketball game. Right. You're training them for 75 minutes so that they can do 60, right? Or for us, it's they want to walk around the block, right? So how do we go about training them for that perspective? And you can inject all the regenerative medicine in the world, and that's not going to propel them around the block. It is muscles, it is motivation, it is all of these things. It's good nutrition that's going to help them get those sort of goals accomplished. So it's a big constellation of providers, of which I'm happy to be part of. But really, I think, and we were talking about this a little bit before, but you kind of have to approach it from the perspective of how do you change somebody's behavior, right?
That's the psychology is the biggest piece.
It is.
And I think when people are injured for a long time, and not that they wanted to be in that way, but their behavior or their pattern of life was incredibly sedentary. And it's very inactive, or they just become afraid of doing certain things. And then sort of the psychology of it all and trying to break out.
How much do you delve into pain science and the biopsychosocial aspect? I think I asked Evan this when he was on, because when we have, clients who are in chronic pain, and it's like sometimes, right, your tissue's healed and your movement is okay, and I don't think you should be symptomatic right now.
Yeah, right.
But they are.
Sure. I definitely am not the expert of all of that, right? But by being around it enough has certainly, led me to the conclusion that people need to have that positive reinforcement. People need to have the confidence in order to do some of these things. I think watching a reduction in pain has motivated some people. I just saw a gentleman of mine today who did stem cells maybe about 8 weeks ago, had a slow progression with it. now 50%, and he's already dropped 20 pounds
That's
in those
amazing.
eight weeks, you know, and is saying, you know, now I feel confident I can do some of these things. And I think that's the kind of thing that changes people's behaviors. So from my perspective, not so much an expert at it, but definitely something that, you know, kind of real world knowledge and application of, and just trying to walk people through some of that, I think is the challenge.
Yeah, I think education's a big piece, and I think being empathetic is a big piece, and listening is a big piece. Yeah, especially when you're in the service industry and somebody's coming to you for help.
Right.
I mean, I think people would probably get a ton of invigoration. For me, when I travel with the rugby team and I'm around rugby players, the thing that it sort of reminds me is that I'm a 45-year-old guy, but like it invigorates me to see people who are strong and to see people who are fast and just sort of able. Granted, they're half my age, right? But there is that sort of like behavioral like click, you know, like some motivation, right? And I think people like you and what you guys do is part of that. Like you guys are a beacon for that, right? You show people, look, here's what's possible. It doesn't have to be, you know, 600-pound squats. It's, you know, it's just doing a little more than what you were used to doing, you know, and having goals and setting goals and you know, being motivators.
That's one of my favorite things about in here is we have such a wide variety of people, and everybody, but the commonality is everybody's here just trying to make themselves better. And that looks different for everybody, but that goal is the same for everybody. Just trying to make ourselves better in here. How'd you get into rugby? Rugby's a wild sport.
Yeah, I finished my fellowship in about 2012, and the U.S. team was going to be down at West Point. And at the time, my fellowship director said, hey, I can't go. Do you want to go for a few days? So I went. Never been around the sport before, first time. Kicked a rugby ball terribly for the first, you know, dozen kicks. And then just sort of like fell in love with it. It was just such a dynamic sport, right? And then they asked me pretty quickly after that to travel to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa.
Cool. That's
some
cool.
really cool, right?
Yeah, when else do you get to travel to these places?
That's right, on somebody else's ticket and
Incredible.
dime.
Right, like you didn't have to sit there and go, okay, let's plan this, let's plan that.
Yeah.
All right, this is on your ticket? All right, I'm good. Let's
Yeah,
do
right.
it.
Clear the schedule, I'm coming. And so that's what started, and then it's been 11 years now that I've been doing that. So it's just been this really great thing where I'm involved now in a lot of teaching for World Rugby and for USA Rugby. I was just in LA for the big tournament that gets hosted there. Planning to go back again in February, and it's just a great sport to be around.
That's
a little bit less common, right? But
For sure. In this country, I mean, what are like the big, it's like the All Blacks. Where are they out of?
they're out of New Zealand.
That's where it's big, right?
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a population of New Zealand, something like 6 million people, but you know they've dropped recently, but they've held the number one ranking for, you know, umpteen years.
Have you seen them play before?
Oh yeah.
How big are these dudes?
I covered I think it was a 2017 match between Ireland and New Zealand, and that was the year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the year that the Cubs won. The first time in 103 years.
Yeah.
Ireland beats New Zealand for the first time in 106 years. These dudes were massive, just giant. And they're, you know, football players are very big, but, you know, they're used to very short plays, right?
Yes.
You know, snap, play, stop, snap, play, stop. And this game is continuous. And so these guys are incredibly lean and just pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
Pretty intimidating.
We just got a guy in here who started working out here who's like, he's starting up the rugby stuff up here, right?
Yeah, in Saratoga.
In Saratoga.
Yeah. Saratoga
So-
Jockeys. I think.
Saratoga Jockeys.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's been in here, and I mean, when he walks in, he looks like a football player. He played college football, which makes sense.
Yeah, I'll say his legs are as big as like my whole chest all the way
His
around.
legs are huge. I'm like, okay. All All right, here we go. So, and it's cool to get his perspective and talk to him about it. And I told him, I was like, I'm never going to play rugby. But, there's other kids or people that, definitely would want to do it. And like you said, it's that I think more so for me, it's the endurance side of it than the actual contact side of it.
Is it a lot of, in our country, because it's not a popular sport amongst youth athletes, are the top guys a lot of former football players or a mix?
Yeah, so cross-sport pollination is huge into this, right? So one of so former football players, former basketball players, former track athletes, big part of it. One of the big players in the USA team now was a former cheerleader, right? And so he's come into this, and I mean he's giant, fast, huge, just a beast.
He's got to throw people around all the time, probably, when he was a cheerleader.
Yeah, right. So
right.
He's like,
all right, I'll throw you around now.
Yeah, right. So yeah, there's a lot of cross pollination. We now have a professional team here in the States. It's called Major League Rugby. Pretty expanded pretty quickly. I think we're up to 9 or 10 teams.
Oh wow.
But I would say some of the players too play internationally, which is obviously if you want that level of competition, you got to travel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like how, I don't know, how do they do their schedule? Because lacrosse is like booming around here.
Yeah.
I feel like as much as any sport I've seen. And they have the Professional Lacrosse League, the PLL, but they play, it's a handful of teams, and they just travel the country together, all the teams. They'll be at Albany during the summer, and they'll all play each other, and they draw big
play
crowds.
Like a certain amount of stadiums throughout.
Yeah.
And then they just play all their games there, and people can come rather than each team having their own home stadium.
Yeah, I mean, for the Major League Rugby, there's a clear beginning and end to the schedule.
Right.
For the international matches, it's like soccer and anything else. There's a World Cup, and there's test matches during the summer and then during the fall. So
Soccer confuses me because I'm like, what? When does the season end? Is it ever end? I'm like,
right?
Like they just played like months ago. They're still playing now.
And then they'll go play with their country, and
Right.
then it's like, right, and then they're gone with them for a whole month. So very similar in rugby in that, these guys, pull double duty.
Well, and even like talking to the guy we have in here, they have sevens, which is usually he said that's smaller, faster guys. Mm-hmm. Then there's the nines, right?
So you have sevens and 15s.
Sevens and 15s, right? So he was talking to me about the difference in that and size of the players, and then like the fact that he's literally got, it's like lacrosse and baseball with, you got fall season, winter season, spring season, like, so it is a year-round thing. And I think he said right now he's in, because their summer season, I think, ended like a little early, so he has a little bit longer break before the winter season that he usually has. I think the fall is kind of when he said they get a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
Very small break, but a little bit of a break.
Yeah, it really kind of doesn't exist. And then some of these guys will go into flag and, just to go indoors. Full disclosure, I'm the team doc for the Saratoga team as well. So
okay.
Yeah, so to cover it on multiple levels, and it doesn't matter. These guys, everybody wants to play year round.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a lot of concussions?
Yeah, I think something like 28% of injuries are from the shoulders up in rugby. So concussions being part of that, it's pretty common. It's different tackling than American football is. Whereas American football, there's sort of this like you hit and then they all bounce off one another. In rugby, that's not allowed. You have to wrap their legs and tackle them to the ground. So you're still going to get that inadvertent like head to the shoulder, head to head, head to knee. So all that stuff still happens. But yeah, pretty common. The concussion conversation has become front and central for a lot of sports
in a good way.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you see the Dolphins quarterback this past week.
Yesterday,
I heard about it. I didn't see the injury.
Because he took a hit on when was the first one?
He took a hit on Sunday.
Just 4 days ago, right?
Yes.
I heard that as well.
He took a hit on Sunday, and they said it was a back injury. And
Uh-oh.
if anybody that's got two eyes that's seen anybody with a head injury knows that they can say it was a back injury, but he was stumbling and falling on the ground and couldn't like walk normally. And then he played on Thursday and got slammed to the ground again.
Oh, jeez.
And he had it's called a fencing response, and his hands it was like throwing up like a gang sign essentially.
Yeah.
and he got taken out on a stretcher last night and everything. It was scary. I don't know if he'll play again, honestly, after watching that. Like, I don't know if he'll be able to, but concussions are a tough thing, and they're a thing that needs to be put at the forefront a lot more, I think, especially with sports, rugby and football, anything that involves, even like basketball and lacrosse, like soccer, you're playing sports where there's contact, and you don't have all that protection on, like, and even in football you have a helmet on and you still get those concussions.
Right. I mean, we all watch these sports as families, right? With kids, and all the kids are watching it. And so they see this, and you want to, you want the next generation to understand, not risk in order to avoid it, but, know that there's risk and that it can be mitigated, I think that's definitely a part of it.
What's protocol to return from concussions? Say you get a guy in rugby, gets diagnosed with concussion.
That's
Great.
what I'm interested in.
Yeah. So for us, for those who don't know, the concussion protocol, by and large in the States, is most everybody in a contact sport does a baseline test, and SCAT5 is typically the tool that's used here. So once you do that and you go to play your sport and you have an injury, then you get pulled until you get reassessed, and then if it's confirmed concussion, then you've got to go through a what we call a graduated return to play protocol, the GRTP. In rugby, we have something very, very similar, except we call it HIA, head injury assessment. And so even when we're in international games, and this is the same assessment done by all teams around the world. Now, what I should say that this HIA assessment is something we do only for the pro level teams. So the club level teams, it's all recognize and remove. If you think somebody has it, you just pull them out, get them to their doctor, get them to the ER if that's what's necessary, get them the evaluation, and then the graduated return to play, right? So for our level, it's pretty quick, right? So injuries happen, you get a 10-minute sub out, you get to check whether or not they have a concussion or not. If not, they can go back, right? But if they do, then they've got to do this elaborate protocol. So somebody like your Dolphins player there, even though he's had that on the return to play by rugby standards, he could, get cleared to go back to play. Right. It's just he's got to go through the steps.
Yeah, like he still could. It's the same thing with football. Like they have their 5-step process and whatnot. It's more of the fact that like they allowed him to play after seeing what he did, even though he
I see what you're saying.
Passed the protocol of not having concussion. Where I was listening to ESPN radio on the way in, and Keyshawn Johnson, who played in the NFL for a long time, he talked about he was in a similar situation. Had a head injury, cleared concussion protocol. And he was like, all right, coach, I'm ready to go back in. He's like, no, the hell you're not. You're going to sit your ass right back down.
You're right.
Because he knew, you may have passed that, but your head is still not right. Yeah. And I think that's where, in this situation, the coaches, the GM, the team should have stepped in. And even if he said he was ready to play, then and pulled him back and said, no, you need to sit out. Because it's only been 4 days.
I mean, just by your description, right? Not having seen the video quite yet, but by your description, if he had those kinds of signs in rugby, we're pretty definitive. There's no going back.
Right,
you're done. You're done.
Like he came.
You're
back
done for the tournament, actually.
He came back to play in the first game that he got hurt, and I think that's part of the reason why they played him in the second game was because he did come back to play, even though he probably had a concussion.
And for a lot of these organizations, it's a learning process, and it's development of protocols to ensure that a lot of these players are safe. But hopefully everybody does right,
Yeah, safety is a big thing. This episode of Off Exit 10 is brought to you by Anchor and the all-new Anchor Pro, crafted to endure the most high-performance workouts without the high cost and space requirements of a standard cable machine. Named the best portable cable machine by Men's Health Home Gym Awards, Anchor provides the full functionality of a cable machine in one small space-saving unit. Designed with user-friendliness in mind, Anchor can simply be attached to any squat rack or placed on any wall in your home gym using its intuitive sliding track mount. With up to 65 pounds of resistance, Anchor is built for high speed and controlled exercises alike, from cable presses and rows to chops and lifts. The Anchor has been a game changer for us here at CDSF, and now you can enjoy the same professional quality cable machine in your own home gym by heading over to anchortraining.com and using code CDSF10 for 10% off your order today. Get all the benefits of a cable machine without the high cost and installation fees. Enjoy the portable luxury and space-saving performance of Anchor today by going to anchortraining.com and using code CDSF10 at checkout. That's anchortraining.com, promo code CDSF10 for 10% off your order today. On that front, so one of our big topics in here, and I'd love to get your opinion as a doctor and involved in orthopedics and development of just humans and their body, is sports specialization. And
Oh man, yeah.
I know that's a can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
when
let me
you
open
when you have when
Yeah, right.
when you have a 7-8-year-old and they're
Yeah.
getting funneled into just playing one sport all year round, I mean, physically in a developing body, it's not great.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched on it, but I'm interested to hear what you guys do. I mean, like how you guys think about it, because I'm around athletes, probably less so now than I used to be. But what is your guys' take on it?
I think our take has to start with why it happens, which is the trickle down from these pressures of wanting a Division I scholarship and then youth sports turning into big business and having companies like Under Armour, Adidas, Nikes put on these showcases, guiding you towards these scholarships. And I think that pressure gets felt from parents and that gets pushed onto kids. And then at younger levels, because of that, teams get more competitive. And you feel like, well, if I'm not doing my baseball all year round, I'm not going to make the baseball team. And that gets pushed down from a high school senior to a fourth grader.
Yeah. I think I echo a lot of those sentiments. I think if you looked at, I think there was a mission statement put out by a couple of organizations. When I say couple, I think like all of them. The American Association for Family Practice, the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine, the American Academy of Orthopedics, and ASM. Everybody put this sort of statement out that sports specialization is not great, right? Going forwards and then looking backwards, right? Some of my favorite athletes are all sort of two-sport athletes, like the Russell Wilsons of the world, the LeBron James of the world, right? These are all people who played multiple sports growing up. Traveling backwards in time, looking at the ages for these kids, the mission statement basically clearly lays out, if you're this age, this number of months per year, you should not be doing any sports. And then obviously you can lessen that as time goes on, but I think that's the part that we're not doing a good job of always observing. And I think D1 scholarship, and maybe it has something to do with the cost of university nowadays. And just sort of parental pressure.
Social media pressure, tremendous.
Sure.
Yeah.
The kind of injuries when I was doing predominantly sports medicine, especially anybody under the age of 15, was all overuse. Yeah, huge.
I'm thinking of this past year. I mean, I'm trying to think of the craziest too. I saw a 13-year-old with a spondy in the low back.
Yeah.
We had our youngest Tommy John ever this past year, high school freshman.
Oh, goodness.
But it's all overuse.
And it's crazy because when I think of baseball in particular, think of how much attention they're paying attention to pitch counts and this and all the little analytical things that they're paying attention to. And obviously everybody's throwing harder and whatnot than they used to. But I think back on, Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan threw 100 miles an hour. Like, he was one of the first guys to really be throwing like that. Guy threw 160 pitches in one game and still went out there and continued to pitch. So where is the marketing missed that these kids and guys even in the major league level, you're seeing more attention paid to them on restricting how many pitches they can get.
Yeah.
But why are we seeing more Tommy John surgeries than ever?
It's because they're throwing all year round.
Exactly. And that's, I think, from a young age, from 12 years old.
I think kids bodies can handle a lot.
Oh yeah.
But right, like think about
Until they can't.
Right, until you can't, or unless that a lot is the same thing.
Right, they can handle a lot of variety of things, but they
Sure.
can't handle a lot of one single thing over the course of time.
Right.
Like it's too much at once of one thing is going to cause the overuse.
There's a study a while back that showed that once parents and adults got involved into youth sports, like the injury rates went up by like 6 times. And I don't remember the exact study, but it was some astronomical number. And it was like,
I would think the fun got dropped off 100 times and the injury rates went up 60 times.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, sadly, but I think you guys touched on it too. It's the emphasis is put on a lot of the wrong places. When I watch some of this peewee football stuff and these tiny little kids in this giant helmet that looks like that's bigger than the rest of their body, I'm like, I'm not sure that all sort of fits together.
Yeah.
Football great, but when you're 6, do you need to be crashing heads?
Right.
Yeah. You have kids?
I've got 5 and number 6 on the way. So
Ooh,
yeah.
Congrats, dude.
It's got to start in 5 and a 6 man off the bench.
Yeah, I know. I was going for basketball. Now yeah.
How do you manage a day to day running all of your offices and treatments and family life and
like anything, if you want to do anything, you got to have great support. So wife is fantastic. She handles everything that that needs to be, and then great with the kids and all of that. So it's a little bit of a madhouse. I'm not gonna lie. I was up at 5:30 this morning to get 3 kids on the bus, 1 kid dropped off at school, patient at 8, and just trucking it, just moving along. And then we talked a little bit earlier about I've still got a couple more projects to be done for today, and I don't know, man. It's just like you. How'd you guys build this beautiful facility and get it to where it's the popularity it's at? It's
just like that. You got to be disciplined and organized and accepting of things aren't going to go the way you thought they were going to go. And it took me a long time to figure out that. But
I know somebody needs to write a manual on that. I should have read that.
Yeah, write the manual. Then page 1, you're like, it didn't happen like that, and you're like, yeah, never mind. Like nothing works how you think it's gonna work. Because you have 4 different offices.
So right now I've got 3 different offices.
Okay, 3.
So I've got one in Skinny Atlas, New York, which is for our Rochester, Syracuse folks. We just started our Plattsburgh office in Plattsburgh, New York, and that's really meant to serve upstate New York and Canadians. And then obviously here in Saratoga, we have a smaller, less used office closer to the city. But I would certainly say that those are our 3 main offices currently.
So you just want to be able to draw on more people and wire a bigger geographic
That's right.
area.
I mean, I really think that what we've done over the last couple of years in my office, I honestly believe that I've found the solution for back pain, for chronic back pain, and I think that I'm really excited about what the results are with my patients, and just watching people get back to life has just been amazing for me and the office. But I think I can push this, right? I really think that this could be something that's widespread.
Can you speak?
Available.
Can you speak on it or no? It's okay if you can't.
No, yeah, I speak on it in the sense of
what is the treatment? What is the
so our stem cell protocol is been refined over the 7 years I've been doing stem cells, 4 years of doing the spine. We have a 3 injection protocol. The locations we inject, the processing that that our office has refined down to is, I think, I think it's just darn near perfect. We're 50% of the time getting people 75% relief within 4 weeks.
And low back pain is one of the most challenging things.
It's awful
because there's so many variables, and then sometimes you don't even know you have. It's tough.
Yeah, and then what are your options?
Right.
Steroids or surgery?
Yeah.
right? And then maybe some smattering of things in between, but
No, you're looking at discs, facets, the spinal canal,
all of it.
all of it.
All of it. So that's why we do 3 separate injections over 6 weeks. And we're hitting some of the major structures along that time frame. Obviously everything else matters too. Good nutrition, good physical therapy, linking to it to good exercise regimens afterwards. But being able to crack that seal, I think what we've discovered and what we found for our process it's pretty amazing.
Because even spine surgeries, I mean, because I've had clients in the past who have had fusions, and it's like you get that fusion, and now all of a sudden, this one segment can't move.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now what's going to pick up the slack? The above segment,
That's right.
the below segment, and now you're going to see disc issues, facet issues, something because that one segment is moving way more than it should.
Links in the chain, that's how I describe it, right? You fix 2 links, and then guess what? The link above and the link below now have to do all the work.
Right.
And so I think by doing this, we're actually discovering a lot of people with hip issues. We're discovering people with thoracic level issues. I mean, we'll do the neck all the way down to the tailbone, but, taking the low back as an example, I mean, we're seeing a ton of just people who would say, okay, now this part's good, and now this part hurts, and I never realized I had this pain before. Right. And I think that we're doing a lot of sick medicine, right? So we're sort of like waiting until people are like broken in order to do something about it. I'd love the conversation to get to early identification, early therapy.
Yeah.
Better behavior, better lifestyle, better nutrition.
Yeah, but
right?
the insurance in our med model makes that tough. Try to get the blood panel that you need to know all of this stuff. Insurance isn't going to, right?
No, you get denied, and then you'll end up having to pay for it out of pocket because somebody's got to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's just like even yesterday, we were talking to a baseball guy in here, and he said, I bet you if every baseball guy did a Tommy John rehab, even if they didn't have Tommy John, they would throw harder. Yeah. And it's also just the prehab. It's like, you're doing prehab instead of rehab. You're trying to be preventative to it. And sometimes I think we, like you said, get to that point of breaking.
Early identification is huge.
That's the biggest thing is the early identification.
I'll tell you, I've injected my own knee, my own ankle with PRP, and I didn't wait. I'm not going to wait till I can't stand on it anymore or walk on it anymore. Once I identified, like, I know the problem. I just went straight for the PRP, straight away. I didn't wait.
Right.
They feel fantastic, and they feel, maybe not that I'm 20, but certainly not so it's going to limit me anymore.
Well, you had that orthopedically, and just think about nutrition front. Imagine being like, you're deficient in this, and that. Let's make sure you're getting the foods that have that, or supplementation if it's needed, before you get sick, before disease comes up.
Yeah. Again, the healthcare system is not, going back to what we started with at the beginning, that the healthcare system is not geared towards patients.
Right. But patients have to be proactive and speak up and put themselves in and steer their own ship. It's just sad that just people don't have the education to do so.
Or they're stubborn.
Yeah, I mean,
or they're stubborn.
They're stubborn. They just, they wait to the last possible minute because they're like,
that never happens.
It'll get better.
I'll never need a root canal, right, Paul?
Never need a root canal. It's all right, Mike. You were there too. Okay, this is a team effort.
So going back to the original question, my goal is for more, right? For more expansion, because I really do think that this is something that more people need to know about.
Is anybody else doing this around here?
I don't know any. So I'm the only dedicated regenerative medicine practice. There may be some other people who do some regenerative medicine, but 24/7. No, I'm it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I appreciate you coming on and making time. I know you're a busy man, 5 kids, 6 on the way, many practices, other ventures, rugby.
Got a lot going on.
Yeah.
So making time for us, we definitely appreciate it. So.
No, I really appreciate you guys having me down. It was meant to happen. This was a perfect excuse to come down and finally check out the space. We share a couple of people, and there's nothing but high praise from from them about you guys. So I'm really glad I've been able
and
to
same
make
to
it.
you, and I'm looking forward to many more in the future.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, just let everyone know where they can find you out, follow you online, contact your office.
Sure. So you can look up Richard Kim Medicine on Instagram and on Facebook to get and to know more about myself and the practice. RichardKimMedicine.com. Our phone is 518-871-9900. And you can always email us at move@richardkimmedicine.com. And everything kind of filters through me, so we'll see it. We'll see it all.
Cool. Well, thanks, Dr. Kim. I appreciate you coming on. This was
Thank
great
you.
and educational for us, and
Appreciate it.
had a blast. So thank you. We'll see everyone next time.
Thanks.
Bye.